Everybody in that valley knew the rule. You don't touch the wolf. You don't feed it, you don't name it, and God help you, you don't kneel down beside it when 12 men have their rifles up. They'd already decided what that animal was. A killer. A thief in the dark that had been pulling calves off the range for a whole dry summer. They'd made up their minds the way frightened men always do, fast and together, and loud enough that no one had to think alone. But there was one man in that hunting party who wasn't looking at the wolf the way the rest of us were. He was looking past it, at something crouched in the shade of the arroyo that none of us had seen yet. And what he found down there in the dust changed every single thing we thought we knew about that animal, about that summer, and about the kind of grief that can live behind an animal's eyes. I've told a lot of stories in my life. Most of them I've forgotten. This is the one I never could. Stay with me, because the wolf isn't the story. The wolf was just the first thing we got wrong. The first thing I remember is the sound the rifles made when the men thumbed back the hammers. 12 of them, more or less all at once, that dry double-click running down the line like a rattlesnake shaking loose in the grass. And then Cole Rennick stepped in front of every one of those barrels. I want you to understand what a foolish thing that was. We were strung out along the lip of the arroyo, the whole valley's worth of angry men, and the wolf was down in the wash below us with its back to the cutbank, hackles up, one foreleg held wrong. Cornered. A cornered thing is the most dangerous thing there is, and every man on that ridge knew it, and Cole Rennick walked down the slope between us and it like he was crossing his own kitchen in the dark. "Rennick, you damn fool, get out of the line," Holly's Ballard hollered. Ballard ran the biggest spread in the valley, and he'd run this hunt too, from the first cup of coffee that morning to this last hot minute. "Move, or so help me we'll shoot around you." Cole didn't move. He didn't even look back at us. He had his hands out a little from his sides, palms down, the way you gentle a horse that's fixing to bolt, and he was watching that wolf with an expression I couldn't read from where I stood. I had my own rifle up like the rest of them. I want to be honest about that, because this whole story turns on honesty, and I'd be a liar if I painted myself standing apart from the mob. I wasn't apart from it. I was in it. My finger was inside the trigger guard, and my old knee was screaming from the walk down the ridge, and I was thinking, God forgive me, shoot the thing and let's go home. My name is Amos Tebbs. I was 61 years old that summer, which is old for a man who spent his life horseback, and I ran a little claim on the poor end of the valley where the grass gave out. I want to tell you I was wise. I wasn't. I was tired and I was scared like the rest of them, and the only thing that made me any different is that I've kept a book my whole life. A little tally book, water-stained, held together with a boot lace, and every night before I sleep I write one word in it. Just one. Whatever the day was. My wife taught me my letters before she passed, and it was her notion, the one word, a way of holding on to a day so it couldn't slip off entire. I've still got the book. The word I wrote that first night is wolf. I remember because my hand was shaking so bad it looks like a child wrote it. But I'm ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we all came to be standing on that ridge with murder in us. It had been the driest summer any of us could remember. The creeks that ran year-round had gone to strings of green pools and then to cracked mud, and the mud had gone to dust, and the dust got into everything, your coffee, your bedroll, the corners of your eyes, so you were always half crying whether you meant to or not. The grass came up in the spring thin as a boy's first whiskers, and then just quit. By July the cattle were walking skeletons, and cattle that are that far gone start to die. Now here's the thing about cattle dying. A rancher can stand almost anything except not knowing why. If a cow dies and you can look at it and say bloat or drought or she was old, you can bear it. You put it in a column in your head and you move on. But that summer they were dying and we couldn't always say why, and into that not knowing crept the story of the wolf. Somebody, I think it was one of the Ballard hands, found a calf half eaten out on the flats in June. Wolf sign around it, they said. And after that, every dead thing in the valley had teeth marks in the story whether it had them in the flesh or not. A cow drops from thirst and swells up, and the coyotes and the buzzards get at her overnight, and by morning it's the wolf did this. Fear does its own arithmetic. It adds and never once subtracts. We'd all seen the animal, or claimed to. A big gray, bigger than the little brush wolves we were used to, moving along the far ridgelands at dusk. Alone. Always alone, which was strange because wolves run in families and this one seemed to have no one. That should have told us something. It should have told me something, an old man who'd buried enough people to know what a solitary creature looks like. But I didn't listen to it. I filed it under Wolf, and I picked up my rifle when Ballard came around, and I rode out with the rest of them at first light, 12 men and a pack of dogs, to put an end to the thing we decided was killing us. The dogs jumped it up out of a dry side canyon around mid-morning and ran it near 2 miles before it turned to fight. And it turned to fight in that arroyo because it was hurt, that bad foreleg, and it couldn't run anymore. And because, though we didn't know it yet, it had a reason down in that wash that mattered to it more than its own life. And that's when Cole Rennick stepped in front of the guns. I should tell you about Cole, because everything depends on him and none of us really knew him. He'd come into the valley maybe 3 years before, bought out old Peterson's failing claim up in the Pinon country, where the grazing was too poor for a big outfit to bother with. He kept to himself. He came to town for salt and coffee and nails, and he left again. And in 3 years I don't think I'd heard the man string more than 10 words together at a stretch. He wasn't unfriendly. He'd tip his hat, he'd lend a hand at a branding if you asked. He'd stand you a drink and drink his own in a silence that didn't feel unkind, just closed, like a house with the shutters latched. You could tell someone lived in there. You just couldn't see in. There was a story about him, the way there's always a story. They said he'd had a wife and a boy, back wherever he came from, and that he'd lost them. Some said fever. Some said a flood, a flash flood, the kind that comes down a dry wash in a wall when it's storming up in the mountains 20 miles off and clear as glass where you're standing. That was the one I believed, though I couldn't have told you why, except that Cole Rennick built his cabin up on a rise, high above every wash on his place, higher than any man needs to build, and a man builds high like that for a reason. He had a habit, too, that I'd noticed. When he stood still, waiting on his horse, waiting in line at the mercantile, his right hand would go to his shirt pocket and press flat against it, just rest there, like he was checking something was still there. I never saw what was in the pocket. I never asked. Out here you learn there are pockets you don't ask about. So there he was, this shut-up, quiet man, standing between a wolf and 12 rifles, and the strange thing, the thing that made every one of us hesitate instead of firing, was that his hand was pressed flat to that shirt pocket again. In the middle of all that, like whatever was in there was the thing that had walked him down that slope. Cole, I heard my own voice come out of me, thin and cracked. I don't know why I was the one who spoke. Maybe because I was old and the old are allowed to be foolish out loud. Cole, son, come on up out of there. It ain't worth you. He answered me without turning around, and it's the most words I'd ever heard him say at once. It's not doing what you think it's doing. His voice was low and even. Look at it, Amos. Really look. It's not trying to get away from us. It's cornered, Ballard snapped. Course it ain't running, it can't run, its legs stove up. No, Cole shook his head slowly. It could climb that far bank. It's hurt, but it could make it 3-legged and it'd lose us in the rocks. I've watched it a full minute now and it hasn't looked at that bank once. He paused. It keeps looking behind itself, at the cut bank. It's got its body between us and the cut bank. Nobody said anything. I looked, God help me. I finally looked, the way you look at a thing when you stop looking at the story about it. And Cole was right. The wolf wasn't watching us the way a trapped animal watches the thing that'll kill it. It kept swinging its head around to the deep undercut shade at the base of the arroyo wall behind it, and then back to us, and then back to the shade, frantic, dividing itself. Guarding. It was standing over something. There's something back there, Cole said quietly. In the shade under the bank. Pups, somebody said, and there was an ugly satisfaction in it. She's denned up. That's her whelps back there. And a couple of the men actually laughed, low, and I heard a rifle settle more firmly into a shoulder, because to them that was better news, not worse. Kill the she-wolf and dig out the pups and drown the lot, and you've solved your whole summer in one morning. Cole heard that laugh too. I watched something go through him at that laugh, a stiffening, all down his back. Hold your fire, he said, not loud, but it went down that line of men like cold water. I'm going to look, everybody hold. Rennick, you shoot into that wash, Cole said, and now he did turn just his head just enough to show us the side of his face, and you'll answer to me for it, every one of you, I mean that. And then he turned his back on all 12 of us, on all 12 guns, and he walked toward the wolf. I've thought about that walk more times than I can count. Later, when I understood things better, I understood the courage of it differently than I did in the moment. In the moment, it just looked like a man being reckless with his own life. Later, I understood that Cole Rennick was not being reckless with his life at all. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he'd have told you his life wasn't worth so much that a wolf shouldn't count against it. And that was the whole trouble with Cole. That was the wound. He'd already lost the things that made a man want to keep himself alive, and so he'd become, without meaning to, the only man among us free enough to be brave. The wolf let him come. That was the second thing that stopped the breath in my chest. It should have gone for his throat. A cornered wolf hurt guarding young, it should have torn into him the second he came inside its distance. Instead, it did a strange, terrible thing. It backed up. It backed itself tighter into the shade against whatever was there, and it dropped its head, and it made a sound I'd never heard a wolf make. Not a growl. A kind of low crying, a whine that rose and broke over and over. The sound a mother makes. Cole went down slow onto his knees about 6 feet from it. His hand came away from his shirt pocket and reached out, palm up, empty. And he talked to it. I couldn't hear the words. Just the low, even run of his voice, the same voice you'd use on a colt or a sick child or anything frightened past its own sense. And the wolf shook and cried and did not bite him. And inch by inch Cole Rennick worked himself sideways until he could see into the shade under the cutbank. And then he stopped. He went absolutely still. The kind of still that's louder than any shout. I saw his shoulders drop. I saw his whole body change. I can't describe it better than that, except to say that a man's body knows things before his mind will let him say them, and Cole's body had just been told something that took the strength out of it. Amos, he said. He didn't turn around. His voice had gone strange, thick, careful, like a man walking on river ice. Amos, come down here. Cole, what is it? Come down here, a crack in it now. You alone, leave the gun, come down here right now. I don't know how I got down that slope. My knee had no business carrying me, and I don't remember it hurting, which tells you something about the body under a hard enough hour. I left my rifle in the dirt at the top and I went down, and up on the ridge behind me I could feel 12 men leaning forward all together, straining to see, quiet as I'd ever heard men be. I came up beside Cole. The wolf swung its head at me and its lip lifted, and that crying sound sharpened into a warning, and Cole said, "Easy. Easy, girl, he's all right, he's with me," in that same running voice, and the wolf, I'll never understand it, the wolf believed him. It let me kneel there beside him in the dust and the sharp cold shade under the bank. And I looked where he was looking. There was a child under the arroyo wall. A boy, curled up small in the deep shade with his knees drawn to his chest, an Apache boy, 10 years old maybe, maybe less. It was hard to tell for how thin he was. His skin had that grayed-ash look that dark skin gets when a body's gone too long without water. His lips were split and crusted. He had on the rags of a shirt and a pair of trousers cut down from a grown man's, cinched with a length of rawhide, and his feet were bare and cracked and bleeding, and there was a fever coming off him. I could feel it from a foot away, coming off him in a wave like off a stove. And he was alive. His eyes were open. 2 black eyes, enormous in that starved little face, and they were looking at us, at me, at Cole, at the men on the ridge he could hear but not see, with an expression I have never in my life forgotten and never will. It was not fear. That's what undid me. A dying child ought to look afraid, and there was no fear in that boy at all. There was only a flat, ancient, bottomless hatred, worn smooth and cold, the look of a creature that has learned past all argument that the world is made of people who come to hurt him, and that the only dignity left is to hate them to the end without begging. He didn't beg. He didn't cry out. He was 10 years old and dying of thirst in the dirt, and when the men came, he pressed himself back against the bank and got his hands up, not to shield himself, to make fists. And the wolf stood over him, shaking, hurt, crying that mother's cry, guarding him from us the way it had guarded him. I understood all at once, through the whole burning length of that summer, from the sun, and the drought, and the dogs, and the buzzards, and every other thing in a world that had already taken everyone else who was ever supposed to stand between this child and death. I heard Cole make a sound beside me, a small broken sound down in his chest. His hand had gone back to his shirt pocket, and this time it fumbled the button open, and it drew out what was inside, a small square of tin, a folding tin type the size of a playing card, gone soft at the corners from 3 years of being pressed flat against a heartbeat. He opened it with his thumb without looking away from the boy, and I looked because I couldn't help it, and inside it there was a photograph of a boy. A different boy, a fair-haired boy of about 10, sitting stiff and proud in a Sunday collar, one small hand resting on the shoulder of a woman with Cole's own eyes. Cole looked at the photograph in his hand, and then he looked at the Apache child dying in the dust in front of him, and something happened in his face that I have never had the words for, though God knows I've written 1 word a night in that book my whole life trying to find them. "We're not going to hurt you," Cole said to the boy. His voice broke clean in half on the second word. "You hear me? Nobody is ever going to hurt you again." The boy didn't understand the words. I could see that he didn't, but he understood something. He understood the way a starving animal understands the difference between a hand raised to strike and a hand held out with food in it, and he went on watching Cole with those terrible black eyes, and up on the ridge above us a man's voice, Ballard's, called down, shaking, "Rennick, Tebbs, what in God's name is down there?" Cole didn't answer him. He set the tintype down open in the dirt, facing the boy like an offering. He unhooked his canteen from his belt with hands that weren't steady, and he began, slow, so slow, to unscrew the cap. The wolf watched him. The boy watched him. 12 men held their breath on the ridge, and I knelt there in the cold shade with my old useless heart going to pieces in my chest, and I understood at last, 3 years and 1 whole dry murderous summer too late, what Cole Rennick had seen the moment he looked at that animal, the thing the rest of us, with our fear and our rifles and our tidy columns, had not been able to see at all. He hadn't seen a killer. He'd seen a mother who had lost her young and found a child, and could not save it alone, and was dying trying anyway. The canteen changed everything, and it changed nothing, and I'll tell it in order so you understand how a thing can be both. Cole held the canteen out low, tipped just enough that a thread of water ran down over his own fingers and dripped into the dust where the boy could see it and hear it, that small silver sound, water falling. The sound the whole valley had been dreaming of for 2 months. The boy's cracked lips moved. His whole body leaned toward it before his hatred could stop him, and then his hatred caught up and yanked him back against the bank, and there they stayed, the boy wanting the water and refusing to want it, and Cole holding it out and not pushing, not once pushing. "You don't have to trust me," Cole said low, though the boy had no English. I know you don't." He set the canteen down in the dirt, open, within the boy's reach and outside his own, and he sat back on his heels and folded his hands in his lap and waited. He made himself small and slow and harmless, and he waited. And I understood that he was prepared to wait there in that ditch until dark if that's what it took, and past dark. And I understood that some part of him had been waiting 3 years already and knew exactly how to do it. The wolf moved first. It limped forward, put its muzzle to the canteen, and drank noisily, desperately, and that broke it. Because the boy watched the wolf drink, and something in him decided that if it was safe for her, it was safe for him. And he lunged and got the canteen in both hands and drank in great choking gulps, water running down his chin and his throat, his eyes never once leaving Cole's face the whole time, hatting him and drinking his water, and Cole let him. And I have never seen a man cry the way Cole cried then, without a sound, without moving a muscle in his face. Just water running steady down into his beard, while he watched that boy live. Up on the ridge, Ballard finally came down. I heard the scrabble of his boots, and I turned, and there he was, red-faced, rifle still in his hands, and he looked into that shade and saw the child, and I watched the whole hunt drain out of him like water out of a cracked jug. "That's," he started, "Rennick, that's an Apache." "That's a child," Cole said without turning. "That's an Apache child. Cole, you know what, the agency, the army, there's been nothing but trouble down south. Whole bands broke off the reservation this spring. They've been hunting the last of 'em all summer." Ballard's voice was climbing. "This one'll have folk. This one'll have." "This one's got nobody," Cole said. "Look at him. Look how long he's been out here. Whoever he had is dead, Hollies. He's been living off that wolf's kills and hiding in the day. That's your cattle killer. That's your whole summer of terror right there. A wolf feeding an orphan child." The silence that came down then was the worst one yet, because it was the silence of grown men understanding what they'd almost done, what they'd ridden out at dawn to do, with their dogs and their columns and their fear. There wasn't a calf killer in that arroyo. There was a wolf that had lost her pups. Cole showed us later the healed rope scar around her neck, told us she'd been caught in something, a snare or a trap line, and got loose but not before it went bad, and how a she-wolf grieving her own dead young will sometimes take up a stray thing and mother it past all sense. And there was a boy that a wolf had decided was hers. They'd killed cattle together to live, a hurt wolf and a starving child, the way the desperate will, and we'd made them into a monster because a monster was easier to hunt than the truth was to look at. Some of those men rode home that day and never spoke of it again as long as they lived. That's the human way too, and I don't judge it as hard as I used to. Shame is a heavy thing to carry, and not every back is built for it. Now here comes the part I've turned over the most. The part with the choice in it, because there's always a choice, and this one had teeth. We got the boy up out of the arroyo. Cole carried him, and the boy led him, too far gone to fight it, and I think too far into some private truce with this one strange man who'd knelt in the dirt and cried over him. And we got him to Cole's place, up on the high rise above the washes, and Cole and his neighbor woman, Mrs. Dorn, who'd raised 9 of her own, nursed that child back from the very edge of dying over the next 2 weeks. The wolf came too. She wouldn't be parted from him. She lay outside the cabin door and would not be driven off, and Cole would not let anyone try, and after a while nobody wanted to. But Ballard had been right about one thing. Word travels. And before that boy could walk 10 steps on his own, word had gone down the valley and out of it, and one hot afternoon in August 2 men rode up onto Cole's rise. One was the Indian agent from the reservation 40 miles south. The other wore an army coat too heavy for the weather. They'd come for the boy. I was there. I'd taken to riding up most days, if I'm honest, because I couldn't stay away, because I'd knelt in that shade too, and something had got into me that wouldn't let go. I heard the whole of it from Cole's porch. They were not cruel men, and I want to be fair to them, because it would be easier to tell this with a villain in it, and there wasn't one, not really. The agent was tired and dusty, and he had papers. He explained it all reasonable. The boy was a ward of the government. There was a school back east, a good Christian school, he said, and maybe he even believed it, where the boy would be taught to read and to farm and to be, he said, civilized and be made fit to live in the world that had rolled over him. It was the law. It was, the agent said, the kindest thing. I have lived long enough now to know what those schools were. We didn't all know it then, or we let ourselves not know it, which is its own kind of crime. Children went into them and came out strangers to their own mothers, or didn't come out at all and lie under stones back east with numbers where their names should be. I didn't have the words for it that day on the porch. But Cole looked at that agent and Cole knew. I could see he knew. He'd already lost one boy to a thing that came clear out of a blue sky, and he was not going to hand this one over to another one. No, Cole said. The agent sighed like a man who'd heard no 100 times and had 100 answers for it. He said the words about the law again. He said there'd be soldiers if it came to that. He said Cole would go to jail, would lose his claim, would ruin himself over a child that wasn't even his own kind. And Cole Rennick stood on his porch with the boy behind him in the doorway and the wolf at the boy's side. And he said the truest thing I ever heard a man say. He's mine now, I don't care what he is. A thing you save is yours to keep safe, that's the whole of the law where I'm from. He was quiet a moment. I had a boy, the water took him. 2 years I've been up on this rise too high for any water to reach, alone for nothing, waiting on nothing. His voice didn't shake now. It had gone flat and certain as bedrock. And then that wolf you all wanted dead brought me another boy up out of a dry wash. You want to tell me that's the laws to decide? I'll go to jail. You'll not take him. You'll have to shoot me off this porch first, and then you'll have to shoot her. And I don't think you've got the belly for either, so I think you're going to get back on your horses. Here's the choice, though, because it wasn't only Cole's to make. The boy had watched all of it from the doorway. He had a little English by then. Mrs. Dorn had been teaching him, and he was quick. That child was quick as a whip, and he understood more of it than the men knew. And when the agent finally turned to go, beaten for the day but not for good, promising to come back with soldiers and paper enough to do it right, the boy stepped out onto the porch. He'd figured something out that Cole in all his fierce love hadn't let himself figure out. That they would keep coming. That soldiers would come and more soldiers, and that a man on a porch, even a brave one, cannot stand off a government forever. That as long as the boy stayed, Cole would fight and Cole would lose, and Cole would be taken from him too, jailed or worse, and the boy would end up in the school anyway, and have cost this one strange, kind man everything for nothing. The boy looked up at Cole, and then he looked out at the mountains, the high blue broken country to the south where his people had gone, where the last free bands were, where a wolf and a boy who knew how to live off nothing might still disappear and not be found. And I watched a 10-year-old child do a piece of arithmetic that would have broken a grown man, and come out the far side of it with the answer. He was going to go. He was going to leave the one safe place he'd found and the one man who'd knelt in the dust for him, and he was going to take the wolf and go into the mountains, not because he wasn't loved, but because he was, and because he'd already watched love get people killed, and he would not watch it again. He didn't say it. He couldn't have found the English, and I don't think he'd have said it if he could. He just reached up and took Cole's big hand in both of his small ones, the way you do when there's a thing you can't say, and he held it a moment, and then he let it go. They came back for the boy 9 days later. Cole had known they would. What the agent didn't know, what he found when he rode up onto that rise with 2 soldiers and all his paper, was that there was no boy to take. Cole met them on the porch alone. He told them the boy had run off in the night, slipped out and gone and taken the wolf, and no, he didn't know where, the mountains were big, and no, he wouldn't be helping them look. The agent cursed and threatened and rode his horses up and down every wash on the place and found nothing, because there was nothing to find, and by dark they gave it up and went, and they never did come back again. A child and a wolf are 2 small things in a country that size. There's a mercy in bigness sometimes. It swallows what needs to be swallowed. I asked Cole once, years later, if he really hadn't known where the boy went. He was quiet a long while. He'd gotten old by then the way I had. We were on the same porch. And finally he said that on a couple of nights right after, in the deep dark before dawn, food had gone missing from the lean-to. A little, never much. Some dried meat, a twist of salt, once a knife he'd left out that he'd have sworn he set down inside. And that one morning at the end of that first winter, he'd found, laid on the porch rail where he couldn't miss it, A single gray feather bound with a strip of rawhide, the exact color of the belt that boy had worn up out of the arroyo. And that after that, he said, there was nothing. No more food gone. No more feathers. Nothing. Which he took to mean, and he said this looking out at the South Mountains, not at me, which he took to mean that the boy had finally made it all the way to wherever he'd been going. That he was grown enough, or safe enough, or gone deep enough into his own free country, that he didn't need to come down and rob a lonely rancher's lean-to anymore. Or it means the winter got him, Cole said. Him and her both. I've thought that too. Some nights that's the one I believe. He turned the little tintype over in his hands. He still carried it, still pressed it to his shirt pocket, only now I knew there were two boys in there, one you could see and one you couldn't. But I choose the other one. A man gets to choose which one he carries. That's about the only thing a man does get to choose. I've thought about that more than almost anything anybody ever said to me. That's the whole of it. The wolf they warned him not to touch, and the thing Cole Rennick saw that the rest of us, with our fear and our rifles and our neat little columns of blame, could not. We saw a killer, because a killer was a thing we knew how to hunt. He saw a grieving mother trying to save a child she couldn't save alone. He saw it because he was it. He'd been up on that high rise doing the same impossible thing for 2 years, guarding, alone, past all sense, the memory of a boy the water took. It takes one to know one. It always has. The whole trouble in this world is that most of us are too afraid to get down off the ridge and look. I'm an old man now, older than I ever thought I'd be, and I still keep the book. 1 word a night. My hand's no steadier than it was that first day, worse if anything. Cole's been gone some years. He never took another soul in, never remarried, lived out his days quiet on that rise, and when they buried him I stood at the grave, and I'll tell you what a lot of that valley turned out. The same men. The sons of the ones who'd died since. They came to bury the fool who'd stepped in front of their guns for a wolf, because somewhere in the long years between they'd all worked out that he'd been the only one of us who saw clear that day. And a man like that, you don't get many, and you come to his grave when he's put in it. I wrote a word that night too, same as always. I'll tell you what it was. It wasn't wolf, and it wasn't boy, and it wasn't Cole's name.